The White Pill is available now at whitepillbook.com. This episode is brought to you by Patriot Gold. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a returning guest and author of one of the two best books I read last year called Race Marxism, James Lindsay. You can find him at newdiscourses.com. James, I am thrilled to have you back on the show because you've been going ham on Twitter even more than usual. And one of the groups that you've been going after, there's several, but you've been going after I'm sure you share with me low-key kind of contempt for this kind of bougie boomer conservatism and its kind of ineffectualism and this belief that, if Trump just sat down with Nancy Pelosi and had a long discussion, they could come to an agreement and everything would be great in this kind of 1980s Reagan Tip O'Neill fairy tale. But you've also been going after the so-called Christian nationalists, and you've been going at it hard. Can you talk about where you see this movement coming from and why you are so opposed to it?
Well, I mean, it's fun, actually, before I say any of that with that preamble, up until the moment you said Christian nationalists, I didn't know which group out of like 5 that you
Right.
might bring up, right?
Oh, we can go
Was it
through
going to
all of
be
them.
them? Was it going to be the Ortho Bros? Was it going to be which are kind of related, sort of, but not
Oh,
really?
you mean like the Tradcons?
Well, yeah, the Orthodox
Okay.
Tradcon specific. Well, there's like a bro contingent of the Orthodox religion that goes on Twitter and acts the fool. So that's the Ortho Bros. Or is it going to be the radical feminists with whom, I had quite the spat a week ago or so? You never know who it's going to be. But yeah, the Christian nationalist movement is one where it's primarily Protestant in its flavor, though there is some overlap dipping into Catholic integralism, dipping into whatever this based ortho bro phenomenon is, where the idea is that the reason that Western civilization has lost its way is because it lost its moorings in a Christian foundation. Some of them are very anti-Jewish. Some of them would say a Judeo-Christian foundation on the other hand. So it's very difficult to tell for sure, which thing they mean. And so the movement has about 30 different characterizations. So it's very difficult to say, oh, this is what it's about, or this is who's behind it. But the most broad, charitable, generous explanation would be exactly what I just gave, with the idea that there needs to be this kind of revival or callback to Christian values being at the root of American experience. They frequently quote John Adams, which I find personally hilarious, where he said that the Constitution was written for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other. So obviously, a Christian prince is necessary for us to have a moral and religious people, or maybe it's going to be a constitutional monarchy, or maybe it's going to be an outright theocracy, or maybe it's going to be dominionism, or there's any number of things that it can mean. So that's kind of what it is. Where is it coming from? I mean, that depends on which dimension of it we want to talk about. I think there is an organic dimension where you have a set of emotions that I am very sympathetic to, where people are frustrated, they're desperate, they're scared, they feel like their institutions have been stolen from them, which they are correct about. Their institutions have been stolen. They don't see a way back. Maybe some kind of a hardline, muscular Christianity would enable us to rally around a single banner or cross or something and run a crusade and take back our civilization or preserve aspects of it in different locations. Again, there's different kind of perspectives on what it wants to accomplish. And I think that the organic side of it is driven by that. I don't think it's all organic. Anything with this much potential to be disruptive is very likely to have been infiltrated by federal agents, chaos agents. I suspect that is the case with Christian nationalism as well, whether they know it or not. Some of the players are very likely to be, your typical what is it, the meme of the glowy poking something with a stick saying,
Yeah.
come on, do a J6. And I think that there's a huge element of that. I think that the literature in the federal government, whether it's around the House Select Committee on January 6th in particular, which I've read a lot of that documentation, or whether it's in like DHS or FBI reports, are centering in on that this phenomenon, broadly construed as Christian nationalism, is somehow behind what happened on January 6th. And so you can kind of see the makings of a trap there. The wholly evil enemy of the people, enemy of all that's good media apparatus very readily, kind of fluidly, gender fluidly, slides between Christian nationalist and white nationalist as though they are the same thing, playing upon this kind of low information stereotype. And it's not hard actually to find within the Christian nationalist camp people saying things like that CRT is expressly anti-white and playing a white identity politics card, or to find within them even outright neo-Confederates who are kind of pushing that line, and thus to gin up this idea that there is a one-to-one isomorphism between Christian nationalism and white nationalism or even Nazism, which carries a specific extra irony in the last month and a half, seeing what the left has done with those tropes coming out of the Arab world. So, what is it? It's a lot of things. Where does it come from? Organically, I think it comes from a frustration. Inorganically, I think it comes from opportunism on the part of the media government apparatus to discredit conservatives and conservative Christians and Christians more broadly, um, using this label to whip people up into doing ridiculous things or participating in anti-Semitism online or other things that could get them anti-gay activity or whatever. A lot of them bear the Ugandan flag, like people put the trans flag in their bio, or now the Palestinian flag, and other people on the other side have the Israeli flag. Lots of people put flags. A lot of them have the Ugandan flag. And what in the hell do Christian nationalists have to do with Uganda? Why do they care about Uganda? Well, because Ugandan Christians are in the sights of the world right now because they were putting gay people to death. That's the reason. If you ask them if that's the reason, they won't tell you that that's the reason. They'll deny that that's the reason because the first commandment, as far as I can tell, of Christian nationalism is bearing false witness. So, at any rate,
Are you accusing them of being subversive and sneaky?
I do think they are subversive. That's why, in fact, I no longer refer to them as being on the right at all. They're not like the boomer cons, even. They are, in
Not
my
at all.
terminology, the right hand of the left. And what I've been trying to warn people about now for at least a year, pretty specifically, but longer than that, usually I usually get a lot of punishment for doing this, is like, so I used to fight, right? Like, I used to fight for money. This was a thing I did in my early 20s. I know a bit about fighting. I'm not saying that I can go knock out a ortho bro or something like that. But what I am saying is that if I can train you to watch my left fist over and over and over again, I'm going to hit you with the right cross and you're never going to see it coming. So it used to be a thing that I would do. Is a lot of fighters do this. Is they throw out the right or they throw out the left jab, they left jab, and then they follow it with something else, and then they left jab, and the guy gets reactive to the pattern off the left jab, and then whack, you hit him with something from the right that they're not looking at. And I think that's called a rope-a-dope, as a matter of fact. And it's a standard technique in boxing or kind of in all fighting sports. And so if you're only watching what the left is doing, oh, the woke, the woke, the woke, the woke. If you're only watching the left, you're at serious risk of getting knocked out from the right. But in this case, I don't think that this is actually different. I think that they've both left the path of liberty. And so, in some sense, I see it as the right hand of the left. There are other reasons as well, but the boxing analogy is succinct enough for the moment.
There's a lot to discuss here. Let me just go through two things. First of all, that John Adams quote drives me crazy because it's completely taken out of any historical context, because the way it is presented is as if John Adams and his compatriots regarded America as a like moral country, whereas in their writing they're constantly bitching about how everyone's lazy or drunk or so on and so forth. And this kind of boomer con idea of reducing slavery to an asterisk, when I think it was like 1 out of 6 people were enslaved. Like, the metaphor I have in mind is, let's suppose you had a family, and we could take the race completely out of it. Let's suppose you had a family and there's 6 kids, and one of the kids is like beaten and raped every so often. Are you going to be like, oh, this is a great family, except for that one kid thing? And it's just like when you sound like that, just to hand wave it away, it sounds completely crazy. The reason why it kind of holds credence is because for a long time, corporate media doesn't like discussing things, even in fiction, that makes people uncomfortable. So things like violence, rape, drug addiction, all the kind of like poverty, these were like swept under the rug. So if you look at history books, you're just going to see all these kind of beautiful, glorious people doing moral works because fiction was meant to elucidate and provide kind of this Pilgrim's Progress moral code. So you didn't really read about all the like gross stuff that's happening at the docks or in the taverns and so on and so forth. So it's a completely ahistorical, sanitized version of American history. So if you that's what you're taught, then John Adams' quote in that context makes sense. But if you ask pretty much any historian or do a little digging, it was not as if the case that this was a nation run by angels. I mean, the Boston Tea Party was white trash who were rioting justifiably, but these were not, this kind of onward Christian soldiers mythos, or mythos, however,
I don't
it's
know
the
if you
word.
know, not to make you lose your second point, but there's a
Please.
certain irony to the Christian nationalists throwing out this John Adams quote, which is that by their own standards, John Adams wouldn't be allowed in the good graces of society
Oh,
because
I did not know that. Please.
John Adams was a not the Unitarian Church didn't exist when the Constitution was written, but John Adams was in the Congregational Church or something like that, which became the Unitarian Church,
Oh,
and
so
he
he's
became a
basically an
Unitarian.
atheist.
So he denied the divinity of Christ completely. He denied the Trinity. He would not he would not be adequately Christian by any Christian nationalist's definition of Christianity, and therefore, with the system that they're going to set up with the social credit or whatever it is that makes sure that only good Christians are allowed to participate in society, so that we can have a moral, religious people, John Adams would be booted out with his quote, but they'd keep his quote because, again, um, they're not the most honest and high integrity people in the world. They're not the best. I don't know, image bearers of Christianity to those of us who are not Christian, at least. Uh, but there's a certain irony to that, in my opinion, that John Adams wouldn't even meet their basic religious tests that they want to set up in John Adams' name.
Or it's like how people have just that one Eisenhower quote warning about the military industrial complex and know literally nothing else about Eisenhower as president other than maybe he had Nixon as VP. To your other point, I think there's a lot of Mott and Bailey engaged here in the same way that I think most right-thinking people can agree that racism in the sense that, someone who's, Hispanic shows up for a job, the interviewer takes one look at them, says, "We're not hiring your kind here," and shows them out the door is abhorrent and disgusting. Therefore, white fragility, you need to, affirmative
Yeah.
action, all this other stuff, right? They just toggle between those two things. Once they get you to accept a basic premise that's almost undeniable, they extrapolate to that to just completely deranged ideas. I think it's kind of indisputable that many people find Christ or find religion of some kind and become more moral people. I know many people personally who like, look, I'm going to get my act together. I'm going to be a better dad, better husband, better friend, and take my moral life seriously. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to cuss. I'm going to take care of myself and be a good citizen. Fair. And if there's more of people who are living morally and ethically and can look at themselves in the mirror and said, I did what I could with what I had, that's great. Therefore, and they just extrapolate that to all sorts of other things that like, women shouldn't be left outside the home. And it's also drives me crazy, this trad con idea, because this vision of like the female in the wife being basically the submissive property of the husband is also crazy because although women didn't have the vote and maybe they weren't property owners, they weren't as a rule all shrinking violets who did not have power in their home and whose voices were not heard. I mean, no matter what time period you go to, try to shut a broad up. It's not going to happen.
I used to date this super, super patriarchal family, this girl from this super patriarchal family back when I was in college, like 20 something years ago. And like, it was like dad's rules or the whole house. And like, we don't have to get into it, but it was legit like religious patriarchy. And then like one day, dad was sitting there at the end of the dining table, like being like his grumpy dad self, like ordering everybody around and bossing everybody around and saying, you know, stereotypical patriarchal crap. And my girlfriend's mom leaned over to me and was like, "You see, it's biblically true that the man is the head of the household, but what's not always mentioned is that the woman is like the neck, and the head doesn't look at anything that the neck doesn't let it look at." And I was like, "Oh, I see how all this works. Yeah, yeah, no, you're exactly right." It's kind of funny that you bring up. Well, it's not funny. It's I think useful to point out when you bring up the Mott and Bailey that not only is this probably occurring, There was actually one of the people who was lightly involved, I don't know where his involvement is with Christian nationalism now, did a thread on Twitter. I think it's Josh Dawes is the name, but I might have him mixed up with somebody else. A number of months ago, where he actually talked about the Motte and Bailey and how
Oh,
there are lots of definitions of Christian nationalism, and in fact that it's strategically useful for the Christian nationalists to have multiple definitions of their movement so they can do the Motte and Bailey, which
wow.
I feel like was quite the confession. Now, on the other hand, like I said, I read some of the reports from the House Unselect Committee, as President Trump has it, on January 6th, talking about Christian nationalism. In fact, I've done some public talks about some of that documentation specifically. They also have a very kind of expansive, weird, like reverse Motte and Bailey understanding of the concept. Like they go after Eric Metaxas like crazy. Like they've got a whole page or so dedicated to him in this one document that he's like a ringleader of Christian nationalism. And at one point, though, they're explaining that Christian nationalism, which is the thread that ties everything together, according to them, it's the thread that ties together all aspects of the catastrophe of January 6th, peace be upon it, worst day since Pearl Harbor, worst day since a volcano, worst day since the dinosaurs died. I mean, you can't even imagine how bad January 6th was. Well, the thread that ties it together is Christian nationalism, but their definition at sometimes is so expansive, which they tie to neo-Confederatism, which they tie to like all this political violence and gallows and nooses and all this other crazy stuff and Trump, Trump, Trump. Their definition is so expansive that somebody giving a prayer that says, God bless our country, in Jesus' name I pray, would constitute Christian nationalism because
Right.
you've used Christian motifs to bless the country. And so it's this incredible, like, ability to step back and forth between things that are perfectly normal and then, the animating force behind the worst day since, the asteroid collided with Earth and created the moon. And it's just like the absolute dishonesty to be able to equivocate between those things, which is utilized by the movement itself to advance and expand, and is weaponized by the federal agencies that are trying to pin these people down. On the other hand, is an extraordinary. It's just such an extraordinary cause for concern around the entire concept. Whatever sympathies you have for the movement, whatever sympathies you have for Christianity or patriotism or whatever else.
Folks, as a Texan, let me assure you that there is no better gift for the holidays than the gift of quality meat. The holidays are here, and let Omaha Steaks take the guesswork out of gifting. Shop carefully curated gift packages. They're guaranteed to make spirits bright all winter long. Go to omahasteaks.com, save 50% off site wide. Plus, when you use promo code Malice at checkout, you get another $30 off your order. You can send tender, juicy butcher's cut filet mignons, mouth-watering burgers, gourmet jumbo franks, and they also have easy-to-prepare meals that are ready in a flash. With Omaha Steaks, the possibilities are endless. Omaha Steaks is ready to ship your order right away, so shop early and beat the shipping rush. Go to omahasteaks.com, use promo code MALICE at checkout. Omaha Steaks is a gift from the heart, a gift that will be remembered with every unforgettable bite. Order with complete confidence today, knowing you're ordering the very best. Visit omahasteaks.com. Take advantage of 50% off site-wide. Plus, use promo code MALICE at checkout to get that extra $30 off your order. Here's the thing. They're very smart. They sent me some, and my buddy Jay cooked them up, and they were absolutely delicious. So I am delighted to be able to tell you that Omaha Steaks will be a great gift for anyone. Let's get back to the show. The other thing that's kind of fascinating to me is the boner a lot of these Nazis, and I'm using the word quite specifically, have for Trump, in that his daughter converted to Judaism and practices it. Like, this isn't like ancillary to Nazi thought. This is like a big one. So, I think he's probably been the most Zionist president in history, unashamedly so. He talks about it constantly. And yet somehow they see him as their path to destroying, like, so-called Jewish influence in government, where it's just like, if your concern objectively is to have, is Jews in government, who did he surround himself with? So it's just also bizarre. I think as our culture like fractures into these silos, in terms of politics and people just talking to themselves or people who think similarly to them instead of to one another, which I'm broadly speaking in favor of, I didn't realize how dumb some of these conclusions get, in the sense of like, you know, people just manage to convince themselves of something, whereas like the slightest discussion with someone even outside just adjacent to you would be like your conclusion absolutely doesn't make sense for some very basic premise.
This is where I get worried, like within certain aspect or certain elements of these siloed communities. If let's just put it this way, if I was in the CIA, in full disclosure, I am not, which is exactly what I'd say if I was.
Exactly. We're
Full
both
disclosure,
Mossad.
for reals, I am not.
We're Mossad.
If I were in the CIA, I would definitely be sending people to go agitate those communities, or
Yeah.
paying people within those communities to agitate in particular directions that can become fruitful later. This isn't me speculating about what I would do as this nefarious ultimate super genius of CIA worth. This is known procedure. This is literally what they did in the kidnapping plot for Governor Whitmer, for example. They find things that are happening. So we might just say that these intelligence blokes are not so intelligent. They're not coming up with movements de novo. In fact, we have good reasons to believe that when they do come up with them, that's dudes in khakis. It looks like they all passed a physical fitness test last week wearing masks and sunglasses and baseball hats in the most obviously ridiculous theater trope since Les Mis. But
And none of whom are docs somehow, even though anyone
some
who has a
of somehow they all have the immunity of Ray Epps. It's just unbelievable how that works every single time. And we know that what they do is that they find existing movements that have some organic basis, some um, nucleus of discontent, and then they get in there and they goad those things and they infiltrate them and they let them get bigger and they push them in particular directions. They call them nudge units, and they wait until something pops off, and then they catch everybody, not just within like the central core, but everybody like 3 orbits out is somehow now guilty by complicity with this new grand moral panic. This is exactly how they're able to draw the particularly ridiculous, but not ridiculous, dangerous conclusion with everything else going on, that right wing white supremacy is the overwhelming greatest danger to safety, even for Jews in the United States today, when this just overwhelmingly, blatantly not true.
one of the most shocking things I've seen in last month, and this I just couldn't believe to what extent conservative discourse has moved on this issue. It's just like astronomically quickly. I watched Dinesh D'Souza's new film Police State, right? And Dinesh D'Souza, in many ways, is like king of the boomer cons. I think he made a movie comparing Trump to Lincoln, and Republicans good, Democrats bad. It's usually his MO, and that's fine. And there's a time and a place for that. I can wrap my head around it. In this movie, he discusses how there was some kid who was like radicalized, some Muslim kid, to the point where the kid's like, kill America, or he wants to wish harm on, the president or somebody else. So the kid's bought it, like a college student, I mean. So he's bought in. Like, it's not like that his views are like, like slightly to the left or slightly to the right. Like, he has been already ideologically radicalized. And Dinesh in this film shows how the CIA uh, gets him to like join Al Qaeda. They give him like $10,000 to try to like buy stuff and recruit people. And you're watching this, and to watch Dinesh D'Souza be like, yeah, the guy wants to kill people, but he's just some college kid with goofy ideas. The CIA are the real villains here, and he's not wrong. But to watch a extremely prominent conservative downplay someone who has terrorist intentions and point the real finger at the fact that it's the CIA that's funding him and kind of empowering him. I was like, holy crap! Because I'd say what 5 years ago, like literally, like what, no, 2015, so 8 years ago. If there's any hint of someone saying this, you're literally identical to Alex Jones, and you're read out of any kind of conservative conversation. Like, there's just no space for it.
Well, it has the skepticism toward the so-called deep state, or the counter state in the conservative circles has, I think, for some very good reasons, exploded in
Yes,
the past, really 8 years. They get really mad when you point out that it's been largely in the last 8 or 10 years, because there were the diehards that were doing this back in the '90s, and
sure, that's
nobody
fair.
listened to them at all. And they were right about a lot more than people give them credit for. Like Alex Jones, by the way, did you see his new video game? That looks lit.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna have him on in a couple weeks.
Yeah, thank God.
S Oh,
That
no,
video
my
game.
next 2 guests, just to drive my audience crazy, are gonna be Meghan McCain and then Alex Jones. So I'm gonna I it's you kinda gotta give give 'em the back of the hand and then you give 'em a hug.
Oh, that's sweet, yeah. You gotta give them a little bit of both.
Yeah,
So but yeah, I mean, the thing is that I think that and we talked about this before with how many red pills are you supposed to take before you end up taking the big one with a J and a Star of David on it that's
yeah,
at the bottom of the bottle. Um, the thing is that there is a very good reason to have a healthy level of distrust, and in fact, probably more distrust in many cases than most
yeah.
people still have for the state apparatuses and their integration with the media apparatuses and the corporate apparatuses and so on. And kinda like anything, there are people who, to use the red pill bottle analogy, rather than taking a red pill and taking a red pill and taking a red pill or whatever, they just tip the whole bottle up
Yeah,
and try to chug it with some vodka. And, oh, sorry, they're Baptist, it's ginger beer. And so, you you gotta accommodate for multiculturalism, Michael, as you know. This is a
amen, brother.
That's right. This is a radically multicultural society. And so what there is this tendency that
I
when
noticed that's
you
a world flag behind you world map behind you, not American map.
that's
So, yeah,
well, you
you're
can
just
only
out of
really
yourself.
see America and China because my head blocks the rest of it, and you don't really need anything other than that. I guess India and Australia are visible, but who
Yeah.
cares about that? Canada takes up a lot of space because it's fake Mercator projection.
Yes.
I'm so mad about that. Look how big Russia is. It's fake news. Um, I'm just saying, Africa is huge, and you can't
Yeah.
even tell if it's completely behind my head, which isn't even that big. Um, so the thing is, though, is that there have been a lot of people who have dived in like all the damn way down to the bottom of the rabbit hole, and then they find all kind. Down at the bottom is where you find the really great drugs, the really really powerful pills. The J pill being kind of maybe most prominent among them, but now there's like adjacent to the J pill, there's like, no, the Palestinians really are like the oppressed minority pill. And there, I mean, there's just like, that's like what they're doing. When I left Catholicism, I felt like I was very angry at the church in general. So I referred to my kind of angry atheist phase as turning around and throwing rocks at the cathedral. So you have a lot of these people, I think, who are boomer cons who feel like they got lied to about how America works. Like, really bad, and so they're turning around now, and it's like anything that even vaguely whiffs of, 1980s America, they're, like, turning it with a flamethrower against it because they've gotten into the really good drugs down at the bottom of the rabbit hole.
I had a Zoom call with Jordan Peterson, a couple months ago, and I think, well, he's gotta be, like, 60, just something somewhere around there, right?
Yeah.
And he has gotten so radicalized, but in such a very specific way. Like, listening to him talk was exactly like listening to that, college junior who's read Atlas Shrugged, and the penny drops, and like, "Oh, these people don't have any values other than power. They will torture kids just for fun or make you watch." And it's just like it was almost endearing that at his stature and his career and all his accomplishments, that it's taken him this long to, like, realize, "Oh, this isn't like, Republican and Democrat, like, this is like an international, pedophile cabal, to put it mildly, and they have no souls, and they revel in, destruction for its own sake." Like, so it was really cute. I'm like, "This was me, like, before I could drink legally."
And so that's when he started tweeting in broken verse with
In
all the
haiku,
jokers
he
and
tweets in
everything else.
haiku.
Yeah, he tweets in haiku and puts pictures of the Joker, and well, he's kinda stopped with the pictures of the Joker
Well,
now.
do you understand? He put picture of the Joker to mean clown.
Yeah, of
'Cause
course.
he's a boomer and he didn't realize that the Joker meant the Joker, he thought it just meant clown.
Well, it's the destructive clown or something, something. He probably got that from some
No, but
symbolism.
he thinks it's like, how people post the clown emoji to mean clown world?
Yeah.
That's what he thought the Joker picture meant.
No, no, that's different.
I know it is, and you
Oh,
know it
no.
is, but he didn't, because he's a boomer.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, he's
No.
but he must be protected at all costs. I
Well,
by
that's
the way,
true.
I sat down with him, and I got him to the episode's gonna drop in December. I got him to stop using the expression, or at least he was, um, hearing me out, to stop referring to it as the mainstream media,
Mm.
because this idea that this highly radicalized, self-aware entity is mainstream in any way is fallacious, and it absolves them of their depravity and malfeasance.
No, that's right. Yeah, the corporate media is okay. I just did a thread on Twitter about it today, so whenever this drops, people can be super confused.
Drops Wednesday.
Where I'm borrowing from Wes Yang, I guess, is the one who came up with the term, but he calls it the vertically integrated messaging apparatus,
Okay.
which has a nice acronym. It's VIMA. But what that boils down to is that it's the propaganda Death Star. It
Yes.
literally is like where the beams of the Death Star come together and then it shoots out and blows up a planet. Except what it does is it literally deranges an entire society. It is the weapon of color revolution, as a matter of fact. It's literally the deranging mass media and social media interference pattern that they use to drive a population crazy to do a color revolution, tested both in the Arab Spring and under Otpor in Ukraine with the Orange Revolution. And so this thing, to call it mainstream media, is only like this relic
Yeah.
of really like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and maybe before, where the cable news represented
Right.
that media that the mainstream consumed the most. Um, I mean, I was caught in an airport really freaking early in the morning a couple of weeks ago. I spoke at Penn State and I had a flight out like at 6 a.m. or something terrible the next day. So, I'm sitting in the airport in College Station. And normally I don't sit in airports. I normally walk around and, get a little like cheap simulation of exercise while I have all these layovers. But in this case, that airport is literally four gates and it's one
Oh,
room and there's no food. There's nothing in this tiny little airport for super rich college kids. And so I sat down. Plus, it was like I got up at like 4 in the morning. So I'm like, holy crap, I'm out of it. And I sat down and CNN was on. And it was just like, what you could, if you're aware of what you're watching, it's like you can see the vertically integrated messaging apparatus, the Death Star beam coming at you, and it will completely fry your brain. It will absolutely cook your noodle. And then to realize what's going on in social media is different. It's fundamentally different. The television is directed propaganda. It is 100% meant to mess with your emotions, to get you to buy products in the commercials in particular, but also to drive narratives in that emotional milieu that it's creating. So it's 100% propaganda. Social media is weird because, in a sense, the truth can shine through and you can actually glean real information. But on the other hand, it is like playground for chaos agents. The bot proliferation. I talked to Robert Malone one day, and I haven't vetted this, but he said it in a public talk in front of me, and then we talked about it. So I assume he's not making it up. But he was telling me that the United Nations has hired over 200,000 people specifically to go run disinformation, disagree with people on social media who disagree with us, is basically their job, and go run these narratives. And then the UK government was paying people, I don't know how many, but was paying people upwards of £40,000 a year to go just run, malinformation operations for the British intelligence services online. And then there's the bot problem, which Elon adorably fixed. As you can tell, there's no bot problem left on twitter.com.x. Whatever the hell it's called now. It's he's got his rocket with 33 rockets on the bottom of it flying into space, blowing up and everything else. And all the bots are gone. He carried them off to Mars with his new rocket that didn't work. Just like his program to get rid of the bots hasn't worked. And there's no bots anymore, except that obviously name with 26 numbers after it handle comes in and does serious kind of cognitive destabilizing on almost anything controversial. What I've noticed is that a lot of times I tweet and I get not very much engagement or I get typical engagement. And then sometimes I tweet something that I feel like kind of hits a sweet spot. I kind
mhm.
of suspect I'm hitting a sweet spot, or sometimes it surprises me and I realize afterwards that I've hit a sweet spot because within like the first 15 to 20 minutes, I get an absolute shitstorm of weird small accounts that have
Yeah.
very few followers but follow thousands of people coming in and saying lots of destabilizing stuff. And I mean hundreds of them within 20 minutes, which is it's proportionally way wrong compared to what my normal engagement patterns look like. And I look at that and I think, wow, okay. So now I've hit something that they want lots of confusion and disinformation around. It used to be, do you remember back, like, I guess it probably was 2015 ish. So 8, 10 years ago, there was this big debate like, do we shut down the comment sections on articles?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Do you remember the argument for why they wanted to shut down the comment sections on articles?
Not in detail, no.
So there was one specifically that I remember from one of the worst offenders that we now know today, which is Scientific American, and I don't know why this one stuck out, and I remembered it after all this, but they specifically said that there had been studies done, God bless the studies, there had been studies done that showed that even one disagreeing comment in the comment section would throw belief in the article completely out of whack. That it didn't take almost any amount of disagreement in the comment section to make people discount what was written in the article. Now, 2014, 15 normie brain looks at that and they're like, "Oh, well, the article's vetted. It's very important. We don't want that. We should shut down comments." I see their point, but now, totally woke, took half the bottle of red pills. Uh, 2023 guy is like, "Holy shit, they were running propaganda and they don't want people busting their propaganda
Yes, and
operation."
and all it takes is one person to point it out.
That's right. But this is the environment on social media constantly. And at least some portion, if you hit too close to anything important, some portion of the players in your comments, particularly if you have a fairly big account, are specifically dismiss and malinformation operatives coming to sow confusion and distrust in the thing that you said that hit too close to something. And so the point was that the television is like a directed ray of propaganda, where social media is this weird, the more complicated environment, but where the propaganda is both escapable but simultaneously subtler and
Yeah,
more persuasive where it happens. One of my favorite ones is this style of propaganda. I used to be a really big fan of yours
oh
up
god.
until you said this one thing about Ukraine or Israel or
Yeah,
whatever it happens to be. And now you've crossed the line and I'm out. And you look and it's like 3 followers and you're like, oh no, what will I do?
yeah.
How will I get by today?
I
Um,
always write, "Please keep me updated on our entirely one-sided relationship."
oh, that's really, it's nicer than what I do. When people complain about me, I just block them. Like, and sometimes I tell them, let me solve that problem for you.
Yeah.
And then I block them. But I do wait 5 or 6 minutes, so there's a likelihood they read the message before I blocked them. I really do believe in making sure that I can help people solve their problems with me by excluding themselves from me completely.
Folks, one of the best things about having the job that I have, and I do not take it for granted and I do not take it lightly, is that I get the sleep that I need. I don't have to wake up to an alarm clock. Sleep is so important for both physical health and mental health. And I want to talk to you about Beam's Dream Powder. It's their healthy hot cocoa for sleep. And today, you guys get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder. It's their best-selling healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. They've got delicious seasonal flavors like cinnamon cacao, sea salt caramel, and white chocolate peppermint. Better sleep has never tasted better. Their powder is made with a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, melatonin, and nano CBD to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling refreshed. And a recent clinical study revealed that Dream helped 93% of users wake up feeling more refreshed, and 93% reported that Dream helped them get a more restful night's sleep. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, you could take advantage of their biggest sale of the year, and you get up to 50% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com, B-E-A-M, shopbeam.com/malice. The discount is auto-applied at checkout. No code necessary. That's shopbeam.com/malice for up to 50% off. You need a good night's sleep. We all do. And I know this show puts most of you to sleep, but I think that's more of like the nightmare kind. Folks, our national debt is a real world problem. Our government spends more on interest payments than it does funding the Pentagon. Biden wants to raise taxes on businesses and the wealthy, but use the additional revenue only to fund new social welfare programs. We've gone from $6 trillion in debt to $34 trillion in 20 years. There's a direct correlation to the national debt and price of gold. In 2010, our debt was $13 trillion. Gold's $1,000 an ounce. In 2020, our debt was $23 trillion, and gold is $1,500 an ounce. 2023, $33 trillion in debt. Gold is $2,000 an ounce. And Speaker of the House Mike Johnson warned our greatest threat to national security isn't Russia or China, it's our national debt. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention my name, Michael Malice, and you'll always get best-in-class service from Patriots protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. All you got to do is call 888-505-9845 to get a free investor guide, or even easier, just go to malicegold.com. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 7 years in a row. So call 888-505-9845 or go to malicegold.com. A great way to keep your wealth away from the forces of inflation, in my opinion. Let's get back to the show. To your point about how corporate media works in terms of propaganda, I've told this story before, but it was really one of these moments where like you just something just clicks in your head and you're like, holy crap. I remember when gyms reopened after COVID, and also just the rage of like gyms, which is going to be entirely or almost entirely consisting of people who are very health conscious, are cannot go there. And De Blasio, who was mayor at the time, like they said, we don't have enough inspectors, so gyms are gonna have to wait like another 2 weeks. And it's just like, what, they can't hire private inspectors, just make them pay for it, or at least put that on the table. So that was like another egregious thing. And I was on the treadmill and I was watching, it was either a commercial for either Today Show or Good Morning America or one of these morning shows. And this is a period where a huge percentage of the country was living in fear of death, right? Hysterically so. A huge people were out of work. It seemed by all likelihood we're going to be in another Great Depression, because how do you shut down the economy for a long period of time and expect it just to slide back to normal? That's not a thing. What people just not going to produce, and then everything's going to be fine. And all just sorts, like, people worried about their families, people, kids not seeing faces and losing just all sorts of basic humanitarian, human, like, growth patterns, psychological growth patterns. And I'm watching this commercial and they're all have these like insane like Joker grins, and they're joking around, and they're like playing musical chairs and like yucking it up at like 7 in the morning. And I thought to myself, holy crap, this is how the French Revolution happened. Like, it really just clicked. It's just like at a certain point, people are like, this is so artificial and uncanny valley and completely detached from basic humanity. And even when it's like when Mr. Burns worked with Lisa, and Mr. Burns took all the things that tied the beer cans, the 6 packs of beers together, and made them into a giant net to sweep the ocean clean. He's taking out all the whales and the sharks and like all life. And she's like, holy crap, even when you try to be good, you're evil. And it's like, even when they have these like emotional stories about someone, it's so Hallmark movie artificial and specifically crafted to design to have the audience feel a certain way. I was like, this is what sociopathy looks like on a broad scale. It's not going to be the Joker where he's got the knife and the clown makeup. It's going to be whoever, whatever her name is, Hoda and Kathy Lee, like, elbowing each other while people have to watch their family die and they can't have a funeral about it.
I think it's like the Prime Minister of Ireland praising God that the poor child, the poor Israeli child who got lost, was finally found after, however many weeks
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, I mean, this
You know how kids
propaganda
are. You know
machine,
how kids are, James. They get an idea in their head, they just wander off.
they do. They just wander straight into, a terrorist tunnel, and
Yeah.
boy, these kids these days, I can't believe them. Speaking of kids these days, did you know that also it's back in the news that Anne Frank is a Becky?
Oh God. Can you explain to people what that term means?
A Becky?
Yeah. Oh God.
Well, it's just a white woman that you hate, really. It's somebody who has all this privilege and is special. In this case, she's only famous because she's privileged white girl. If she had been I guess a brown Jew or something, nobody would have really cared, and there never would have been her diary. It wouldn't have been important. And so we only really honor the memory of Anne Frank because she was white. This is a narrative from the kind of ugliest aspects of CRT that circulates every once in a while, but in the wake of the last few weeks, it's been circulating again. Um, there's a lot of Anne Frank hate going on right now. I think because what you have is a young girl who becomes a very relatable character to young girls, who is hiding and fearful for her life because her religion is being vigorously not just persecuted but exterminated by a tyrannical regime. And they really don't want young women, I think in particular, to be able to recognize what that looks like. They don't want to be
Oh,
able to
yeah.
get them to be able to identify with having to hide, with your whole family having to hide from a tyrannical regime that wants to destroy you for your identity. Um, and here we are again. Um, the stories are just absolutely amazing that this corporate media vertically integrated messaging apparatus just kind of drills on us. Um,
My
just
favorite part of the Diary of Anne Frank is, for people who haven't read it, it's not that interesting. I mean, it's interesting historical artifact, it's not a great narrative, but the family had this roommate who's this, like, older Jewish guy, and she really hated him, and she spends a large part of the diary talking about how fucking annoying he is, and a large part of their hiding, like, they were only active at night because there were people working in the house during the day. It was some kind of business, so they had to just sit there completely still during the day, and at night, they can kinda move around more, and she just talks about how she's sitting there and this guy, I don't know what it is, like, there's this expression on the internet called bitch eating crackers, when you hate someone to such an irrational degree on a TV show, if they're just sitting on a couch eating crackers, you're like, "Can you look at her just sitting there eating crackers?" And, like, just watching Anne Frank, like, foaming at the mouth about this roommate is also one of the things that makes it so relatable because she's a kid, and she's, like, kid trapped at so she's not being like, "Oh, yay, we're having a great time in here." She's like, "Fuck this guy, I don't hate he's not my family, I gotta be nice to him." And the funny part is after he survived the Holocaust and to my understanding, and she had not obviously, and he read this and he had no idea that she hated him so much. So he has to the end of his days this weird kind of like duality approach to the diary because on the one hand, it tells a story and he's part of history. On the other hand, like this little girl is just making him out to be a total fucking asshole. And he's like, what the hell do you want from me, kid?
oh, that's so rich. But no, the reason I bring all this up and I kind of keep circling back around this new current thing, which the current thing, of course, did not take place. So it's not what actually happened on October 7th. It's not what's happened since. It's not any. It's the current thing is the result of, or it's like the concentrated essence of that propaganda Death Star beam being pumped into people. And so what's coming off the back of this, we see what's happening already. The rampant anti-Semitism, the crazy George Floyd style demonstrations that are totally organic and in no way ever coordinated by NGOs or anything like that, especially when they involve schools and children. Uh, I know you detect sarcasm, but not everybody viewing is so good at seeing
Oh,
that.
none of my audience can detect sarcasm. They're all on
Yeah,
the
there's
spectrum.
NGOs coordinating all of it every time, guys. Every time. Every single time. But what's coming, and I think
I
that this
can't
is
believe,
important.
James, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to make a confession, interrupt you, because I feel like it is important when I do something completely stupid to acknowledge it and own my shit. Until you said this, I never made the connection between these kind of, like, rallies and the George Floyd stuff,
Oh, it's
and
the
the
same
parallels
playbook.
it's the same, like, I can't
That's
believe it
why I
took you
call
to
it
point this
Gaza
out to me.
Floyd. I call it
Yeah, holy
Operation
crap.
Gaza Floyd.
It's the same exact thing. I can't believe it took me this long to figure this out. Holy
So
crap.
what Operation George Floyd did was mainstreamed a lot of critical race theory very,
Yes.
very quickly, and among other things. But as far as kind of a zeitgeist kind of accomplishment of Operation George Floyd was to mainstream CRT. And in fact, it embedded CRT in virtually everything. Every institution that was kind of ambivalent about it became a CRT institution within like 3 months. Well,
Including, like, Coca-Cola.
oh
Like
yeah,
like, you're
major
not it's not
corporations.
like just universities, it's like Coke, it's like a, Papa John's.
Yeah, like everything.
Yeah.
Like Dan Cathy from, remember, you know how everybody was so proud of Chick-fil-A because they stood their ground about religious freedom. And he's like crying on his hands and knees, washing the shoes of a black guy after George Floyd,
He
like
did
on
that?
TV. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And so, yeah, they stood their ground until that. Well, now we've got Operation Gaza Floyd, and I suspect strongly that what's about to happen or is happening and will continue to happen. There's already a lot of literature about it, kind of in the antiquated sense, but not contemporary and activist driven. is I think we're going to see CRT evolve into critical immigration theory. We're starting to see this play out in the fight that's taking place in these urban centers like Chicago and New York, where they're starting to say, hey guys, all the free stuff that we give you as Democrats is running out because there's all these immigrants here. And so all the black neighborhoods are getting like pissed because like it's all of a sudden prioritize immigrants over everything. You see that
Right.
that was some of the anger in Ireland. Like I don't know if they attacked or burned down a Holiday Inn because it was housing huge numbers of migrants. And that's a huge problem. If you don't know, in Europe right now, virtually all of the 2 and 3 star hotel properties are completely full of migrants.
Oh, wow.
So imagine what that does to your tourism scene, right?
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
want to go on an Irish vacation, let's pretend, and you want to book a budget hotel because you only got so much money. Whoops, there are no budget hotels to book whatsoever. So then the price point on the 4 and 5 stars goes through the roof. Your Irish vacation is like not a thing now, right? But why? Because all the 2 and 3 star properties are completely jammed to the gills with migrants, and all the rooms are being paid for and bought out by the government. It's really a disaster. But what we're going to see is a critical theory of immigration that says that you are a xenophobic bigot if you don't
Right.
agree with all of this. If you don't accept all of this, then you are a settler colonialist. You need to decolonize your mind. You need to decolonize your heart and come to the colonialist Jesus or whatever it is that they have at the heart of their demonic religion. And I have a feeling we're going to watch not only this roll out, but we're also going to watch black people in urban centers who are not happy about it, Hispanic people, getting called far right very, very
Oh, yeah.
quickly. Because just like how the feminists, which is why I was in a fight with the radical feminists that I mentioned earlier, I said that queer theory came out of sex positive radical feminism, which
Yeah.
up until the rad fems of today became very mad about it, was not controversial in any way
That's not
whatsoever.
that's not in dispute at all.
No, well, it turns out that it is, according to the angry radfems who have to blame men and only men for all things. And Judith Butler hasn't identified as a man, so they're sort of stuck with that. And, Monique Wittig hasn't identified as a man. Simone de Beauvoir was just misunderstood. Blah, 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 the same thing. Well, what we're going to see is the same cannibalization of CRT by I don't know if we'll call it CIT, critical immigration theory, but this is going to be the next huge mainstream wave. I think that they're going to push as far as the critical theory apparatus goes. The reason I think that we haven't been flooded with it already is because CRT had been well developed for the moment of George Floyd, well before the moment of George Floyd. So it was very easy to deploy large amounts of materials. Whereas, even though this attack was very obviously planned on October 7th, it doesn't seem to be the case that a huge immigration theory push has been able to be put together and organized in a way that Western audiences would swallow it.
Your Welcome is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Now, most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to me and whoever this is this week, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you could be doing right now, which is getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy. You can save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
I'm Walter Masterson.
And I'm Maximilian Clark.
And we're basically journalists.
No, we're not.
Well, we do travel across America and interview people.
Yeah, using God to solve murders, and it's proven communication.
Tell me everything about that.
But we also dress up like extremists and sneak into their protests.
I care about children. That is why I pay my court-mandated child support.
Well, that's undercover journalism.
Okay, and that time we pretended to be Trump's legal team during the indictment?
Trump loves America. He considers us all family. That's why he's always asking us for money.
Okay, So we are not journalists. We're TikTok comedians asking questions real journalists are too smart to ask.
But we also talk to real experts and scientists and smart people and stuff.
And make fun of them.
Yeah, I guess that's why we named our show We Are Not Journalists.
Because we're better. We have a podcast.
A podcast that's available on whatever podcast app you use to get your podcasts.
Podcast.
Let's get back to it. Well, to your point, because the southern border, and there was it's also interesting how I think conservatives or people maybe on the right, more broadly speaking, don't know how to take a win when they get one.
Oh,
And
no,
I
they
think
don't.
everyone remembers refugees welcome, refugees welcome. There was a huge push not that long ago, before Trump was in office, to have all these Syrian refugees into Western countries, and that got completely demolished and stopped. And everyone but what happens is the people pushing it stop talking about it, but the people who won don't realize, wait a minute, we have this big victory. And a great example of this is Linda Sarsour, who used to be as omnipresent as COVID, and now bitches on a milk carton. No one, she can't even get arrested. And regarding what you're saying about immigration, I think it's a brilliant insight, because what they love to do is, if something is a problem for the average person today, instead of like being like, you know what, you're right, like let's pull back on immigration, they're just going to double down. And Rob Henderson needs to get credit for this. That's what I was just looking up. He has this tweet about how it works. He goes, step one, it's not really happening.
Yeah.
Step two, yeah, it's happening, but it's not a big deal. Step three, it's a good thing, actually. And step four, the people freaking out about it are the real problem. So it's very easy for them to pivot to, oh no, there's nothing wrong with the southern border, as Kamala Harris and some of these others have said. Okay, you're racist. Then it's like, no, you're the problem, because you're a colonizer and you don't realize these people just want a safe space for their families, just like you have. And how dare you exclude them from your country? So, and their home countries are a mess because of you to begin with.
That's right. And so the vertically integrated messaging apparatus of the corporate press here, you won't be able to read it probably, but just to prove that I'm not making
Yeah,
it
the
up.
Dublin riots shocked Ireland, but some of us saw this creep to the far right coming. Yeah, far right Ireland.
Yeah, right. So this is by Stephen McDermott in The Guardian today, as far as I know, or just in the last couple of days. But here's what it says below that in the smaller print that probably is blurry on the screen. Perhaps the mayhem in the city center last week will finally end politicians' complacency about violent anti-immigrant groups. Yeah. And so you can see the vertically integrated messaging apparatus of the corporate press and the government.
How violent immigrant groups don't exist. Only anti-immigrant groups are
violent. Oh, that's right. Well, Michael, there's a word for that. There's no such thing as reverse, like, violence from immigrants. There's no such thing as reverse colonialism. That's called resistance.
Yes, right. Yeah.
That's called resistance. There's no such thing as reverse colonialism or
we're going to rape our way to freedom.
That's right. Exactly. That's liberation from river to sea, from Ireland to Killarney, or wherever the hell it's supposed to be. I didn't mean to make that all rhyme. That was really great. But no, you can see though the messaging apparatus is you can feel it's like the dudes in the Death Star flipping all those switches, like the Death Star would have 1970s fucking switches. They're like click, 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 and you can see like the green beam starting to like glow around the crater. That's this article. Oh no, it's violent anti-immigrant right-wing groups. That's the problem. That's the problem everybody needs to focus on. Oh my God, look how many of them there have been. Oh, wow, here's an example of Tommy Robinson saying something crazy. Oh my God, here's an example of something. Oh no, this is the biggest threat for Western democracy. This is going to ruin our democracy. These people you are going to ruin our democracy. And the whole struggle session apparatus rolls out. And most importantly, what happens is people are set against people. The people who are not in control of, but are rather the targets of the Death Star propaganda beam, are now fighting with each other about which side of that issue they land on. Oh no, I think they do have some right to be here. Well, what about the ones who are here legally? Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And you're fighting about all of these issues. And so the dialectic progresses, and you're splitting and fracturing your society. You're splitting and fracturing a movement that says, look, here's a problem. We want to solve it. And we want a straightforward resolution, and people that are in charge need to give it to us. which is usually what it looks like not that it was in Dublin, but to peacefully petition your government, which is the right of people in free societies to do for your grievances. This becomes fractious, and it becomes, again, siloed and uh, a perfect area for chaos agents to step in and say, no, we need to go inside the Capitol, or whatever it happens to be, to take the most radical fringe elements of that fracturing group, to nudge them over the edge,
Yeah.
and then to say the entire
Yeah.
phenomenon is characterized by that one little piece of the problem that, in fact, wouldn't have been a problem if it wasn't for, like, the fact that there were like 3 autistic guys and like 9 federal agents working together to make sure that a problem arose. And
Right.
this is the pattern, this is the play again and again and again, and we can see it revving up for a critical immigration theory. Now we can full circle this a little bit, go back to the Christian nationalist problem, because do you have any idea how easy it is going to be to gin them up on
Right.
get them out, deport them all, uh, deport them and ask questions later, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, we need a we need a vetting system for whether or not a person that you find on the street is a legal immigrant or not. So let's set up facial recognition cameras to
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
out who is who. And now all of a sudden you have the reactionary movement not only doing crazy stuff, but demanding the exact tyranny that they should be trying to resist. And again, it's when you stare at the left hand too long, you never see the right hand coming.
Yeah, it's always funny to me when they demand this sort of government authoritarianism. They always, or that, I mean, the implication is that they'd be the ones running the guillotines, and it's like, what have you looked at the last like 100 years? Like, at what point were you the guys whose heads weren't or necks weren't literally on the chopping block, as opposed, so if you built, you're doing their work, and that you're the ones doing the manual labor and building these structures, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Okay, cool. Now we're gonna take it." Like, it's just
Yeah. The
over and
subversive
over and
left
over.
takes that stuff over every single time. So they get like a few
And by
days.
their own admission the leftists have taken over all these institutions that you built. So
Yeah.
let's build them a bigger and stronger one.
Yeah, let's build them a Death Star. Why don't we
Yeah.
give them a tank? Yeah, it's crazy. There is that huge issue that the left always takes over the apparatus. Another huge issue is that the thing that's protecting you from that apparatus, like the Constitution or whatever, you're throwing that out. So you're actually doing the left's work for them. And the third thing is whenever you set up any one of these systems where somebody's running the guillotines, what happens in practice is you've created a system that favors the psychopath. So even if the
Yes.
left doesn't take over, psychopaths very rapidly rise to the top of this thing. And guess what happens when
Literal
they
psych
get a
By the
hold?
way, he's saying literal psychopaths, not he's not using
Literal
colloquial,
psychopaths.
literal.
Literal psychopaths. When you create that kind of a structure, all it takes is a very savvy, charismatic psychopath who can play the system like Gavin Newsom to rise very quickly to the top of that thing. And that's when you end up with a Stalin or a Mao or a Hitler, who is able to do the kinds of things that we attribute to these unique individuals across history that are just so calamitous, so heavy in mass murder and calamity and destruction. You are building a system that enables those people to rise to the top. And so you might man the guillotine for a few weeks or a few months, and you may even box the left out of the guillotine. But somebody way more ruthless than you is going to take the
Yeah.
apparatus you built, and you become the primary problem. Just like how when Mao did the Great Leap Forward, that was bad. It was real bad. How bad was it? On the scale of bad, how bad was it? Well, we could talk about the number of deaths. We could talk about the economic destruction. We could talk about it was so bad that he was the ruling dictator of a communist country. And they were like, bro, you got to step down. And he was like,
Yeah.
yeah, better. And so in 1962, Mao tucks his tail between his legs and slinks out of the chairman's seat of China. And what does he do? Does he just go become Citizen Mao? No, of course not. He plots his revenge. And so for 4 years, he starts ginning up young people and he starts doing political organizing and activating different cells. And then wham, 1966, a million plus Red Guard flood the streets all through 66. They cause mayhem. The Mao has enough pull with the police to where they're given virtual immunity. They're acting like the people who do protests in New York City, the so-called protests. And the next thing you know, it's 1967, near the end of the year. The guy who replaced Mao, Liu Shaoqi, sitting on his chairman seat. The Red Guards surround him with their little red books, and they're screaming and carrying on. They drag him out. He says, "Am I not a citizen? Can I not speak?" They say, "No." They struggle session him, humiliate him in public. I don't remember if they beat him or not, but they end up sending him off to die in misery and primitive conditions in the countryside, which is what happens to him. And Mao ascends back to power. So, in other words, when you build the apparatus that the psychopath is going to be able to rise to, they will create conditions around your apparatus that get them to the top. And you, like Liu Shaoqi, become their number one problem. You know what happened to the Red Guard after Liu Shaoqi was deposed? Mao said it was too dangerous. It was too left. It was too radical. And he rounded their asses up with the People's Liberation Army and sent them off to die in primitive conditions in the countryside, or just had them shot. A lot of those poor woke bastards in the Red Guard at the time, because that's what these woke kids in colleges and high schools are, is the Red Guard. A lot of those poor bastards got on the train that Mao sent to them for them, or on the trucks, saying that going to the countryside to do hard labor would wash their brains even more red. It turns out, yes, but in
Literally.
the red of blood, as opposed to the not as good of an outcome as they had hoped for. And so this
So
is
it sounds like
the
you're
story
predicting.
of this machine. The machine will, like, if you set up the model, if you build the guillotine machine, the next guy who comes up behind you that's more ruthless is putting you on it first.
So you guys heard it here first. James is predicting Trump will be back in office in 2024 and will purge us all of the woke people. So great. That's going to end up well for everybody. Folks,
But that's
I
going to be
encourage you
the
to.
Orange Guard, the Orange Purge. It's
Yes,
much different.
Orange Guard, good.
Yeah, that's right.
Folks, head over to malice.locals.com where James is going to take questions from supporters. I did enjoy your most recent book enormously. Are you working on another one at the moment?
This is a yes and kind of weird answer. I have been working on kind of two that are very profoundly stalled. I'm not sure if it's like abandon them and start them again, or get back into it and see what I can salvage or correct. But that said, and so one of those is about how to deal with dialectical narrative warfare, and one of those is about these kind of how Marxism should be conceived of as a theological movement rather than an economic theory. And so that's those two. People are very excited about the second of those, at least.
I'm
And I
excited
don't.
about the first.
Well,
I
they
was more
should be.
excited
They
about
just
the
don't
first.
know that I'm doing it. I haven't talked
Okay.
about that as much
Okay.
publicly. It's actually my problem with that one, just to put it out there, is that I've written about 30,000 words, and I expect about 40 for the entire length of the book. I want it to be relatively short. And the first like 18 or so of those thousand, which whatever the fraction is that works out there, if we had a mathematician, we could figure it out. It's like, what, 3/5, I guess, is like, holy crap. If I go back and read it, this is like really insightful and useful. And then I kind of get drifted into weeds and I don't know what to do about it. So I'm not sure where to go with that one yet. But the and part of the answer is that another guy has written a book. His name is Logan Lansing. He's self-published a book previously called The Woke Warpath. He's written a book, and he sent it to me to have me look it over, and we've decided to collaborate on it, and it should
Oh,
be coming out very soon, maybe as soon as February, about queer theory and education. And so,
I'll have to have you back on to discuss it. That
yeah,
is
that's going to
fascinating.
be an absolute hammer of a book. It's the text is done. I'm in my spare time recording the audiobook already.
Oh, phenomenal.
I mean, we're at the final stages of that, and unless we wanted to add a chapter or something that would make the poor typesetter lose her mind,
What
but
are you gonna what's the title?
we are the title is The Queering of the American Child.
Oh, yeah. Oh, superb.
Oh, it's going to be absolutely. It's. I can say this because I didn't write it. It's so supremely readable. Like, if I have one flaw as a writer, for sure, that is my writing is very dense and it can be very difficult to read. This guy does not suffer that affliction, and so that will bear my name on the cover, and I share the copyright. But technically, I didn't write it.
This whole thing with conservatives being like, "Oh, that's gay shit, doesn't concern me." And it's just like, if you don't know this history and this culture, you are leaving your kids completely vulnerable to predation because they are consuming those shows that you un- I understand correctly is not meant for you, but this is a huge opportunity for recruitment. And it's the same thing with like cigarette ads, like Joe Camel. It's like if you get them when they're 10, 12, 14, you'll have them for life. And conservatives don't get that because, on some level, understandably, they have this visceral contempt or opposition to this sort of kind of culture to consume. A lot of which is actually extremely funny and satirical and subversive. But this is what ends up happening. And I've been fascinated to unpack how a movement has gone from so despised to the point where in the 80s, young men are going to their deathbeds, not telling their parents that they're gay because the level of shame it brings, to the fact that all of Times Square is covered in pride flags. And that's within 30 years. So this history of how they pulled this off is something that absolutely anyone who's interested in cultural change really needs to kind of grapple with and figure out, because they fucking nailed it.
Yeah, so this book is really going to it really clarifies a number of key points in that story. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it certainly tells the parts of the story about how education got transformed, about what queer theory is, about
Yeah.
how activists took advantage of the educational milieu. It's mostly focused on the school aspect, which is of course important because the
Yes.
school, as I think somebody did a study recently proving this. Did you know that children tend to trust their teachers?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Not if let me add them.
yeah, and so, the school, on the one hand, is purveying this with total facilitation through the United Nations, and it's UNESCO's UNESCO is the creator of the Comprehensive Sexuality Education Program. A lot of people don't know that they created that 20 years ago, and they have pushed it. And in fact, I just talked to somebody recently. I was at the ARC thing that Jordan Peterson put on,
Yeah.
and I was talking to somebody from Kenya, and they were telling me what's in the schools. And guess what?
It's there.
Same stuff.
It's
How
in
could
Kenya.
it be that it could be in Kenya? Well, Kenya is a member state of the United Nations.
Yeah.
That's the explanation. It's not more complicated than that. So there is that aspect of it to where this all has to get pulled back so people can see how our education system was transformed and how it was then injected in through these radical activists. With the media, we don't talk that much about the media in this book, but with the media, like you were saying, parents, conservative parents aren't watching this. They're going to ignore it, and then their kids are watching it kind of behind their back. They also don't. We're starting to realize how subversive these activists have been, like that they're just sliding in like double mastectomy scars on the cartoon character in their favorite show. Oh, you're watching the show about the little bunny rabbit or whatever the hell cartoon kids are watching, and now there's a new friend Annie who has double mastectomy scars and all of this. Or
Holy
I'm
crap.
I'm making up an example of things that have happened for real that I don't watch children's cartoons either, so I don't know what they are, but I've seen images of cartoons, both like animated cartoons and also, print cartoons or the books, these cartoon books for kids, where they are introducing kids that have gone through top surgery and all of this, or characters that have. It's pretty alarming. But you see it with like very mainstream stuff like Blues Clues and stuff that like every kid in the universe in a generation gets into. They start tucking it into those kinds of
Yeah.
shows here and there. And so you think, oh, your kid's just watching whatever. I've talked to so many parents out there who, whether it's a book series, this is an example I'm thinking of right now, is a book series, and you go and, the kids are reading the book series and they get points at school for reading. So they get points for every book in the series they finish. And it's, there's 15 books that, like, it's a series that never ends about some character. And you read through the books 1, 2, and 3, and you're like, oh yeah, it's like mystery novels, cool, good for the kids, fun, interesting, cute characters. But then in book 7, it's like all the way balls to the wall somewhere else after they've got the kids completely invested. And the parents are like, well, I read the first 3 or 4 with them. I don't have time to read everything. And, I checked it out. It seems okay. That's just whatever it is. Encyclopedia Brown was a book when I was a kid. That's just that, it's
Yeah.
fine. But then by book 6, 7, 8, whatever, it's balls to the wall indoctrination. This is a technique that they use very frequently. So, you watch the first season of something, it's completely normal. And then all of a sudden, halfway through season 2, it's like nut job.
I talked about this in my book, The New Right. I remember as a kid, when you watched Masters of the Universe, the He-Man show, and I think by law, like every episode at the end had a so-called pro-social message, by which is obviously meant communist propaganda. And I remember one specifically, and I went back and looked for it, and I remembered it correctly, where She-Ra was the one talking to the audience, the kids, breaking the fourth wall, and the message verbatim was, "A tree has as much right to live as a human being." And it's
Oh,
just like,
wow.
this is so and as a kid, I'm like, "What the F are you talking about?" And as an adult, I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is just straight up communism." All right.
As a kid, you
I'm
grabbed your axe and chopped a tree down that afternoon.
I was like Joan Crawford, "Christina, bring me the axe." Um, James, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
See, that's the thing is I totally was, like, anticipating the question, and I was like, "He didn't do it. What has changed? I've not watched a few episodes, and now it's all different." No, this was great. Getting to talk about these issues, period, with somebody
Yeah.
who's tapped in enough to be able to have the dialogue. This has been a really refreshing conversation. Like, the moment where I knew that this was gonna be an awesome conversation was when I described kind of the conceptual murkiness around Christian nationalism from the first question, and you immediately locked into the fact that there's a Mott and Bailey going on. Then I think, though, my favorite part wasn't just, this, I hate to use the word synergy, but this, I don't know what to call it right now, that we meshed very well on what we were talking about. But when we decided to take on the corporate press slash vertically integrated messaging apparatus, that was a very exciting time for me. So getting to bounce those ideas back and forth in terms of both concepts and contemporary examples, I think was, as the kids might have said a decade ago, really fresh.
You are welcome.
Hold on to your jingle bells. Pluto TV has all your holiday favorites for free. Enjoy our season's greetings category with 9 holiday channels, including holiday movie favorites by Lifetime, Festive Fireplace, Holiday Lights, and Hallmark movies and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming holiday favorites on live channels and on demand. With thousands of free movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is your home for the holidays. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.